June 15th special meeting of the Town of Essex Select Board to order. And I want to give everybody some idea of how the evening is going to go. We called this special meeting for the primary purpose of interviewing potential members of applicants to fill the vacant seat on the select board. And we have 9 folks who have stepped up and expressed interest, and we will be interviewing them tonight. So we will do a public to be heard at the beginning of the meeting, as we always do, which would be for anybody in the audience who wishes to speak to the board on items that are not on the agenda. And then we will also give space and time to people briefly before we start interviewing who wish to make comments about the select board interviews this evening. We will be interviewing all 9 candidates in reverse alphabetical order to accommodate some scheduling for some of the candidates. And each candidate will have an opportunity to make a statement about themselves. And then there are 5 questions that we will ask them. Each candidate will hear exactly the same 5 questions. And each candidate will have 15 minutes. And we're going to have to keep it strictly to 15 minutes. So we'll be attentive to time on that. After we have interviewed each candidate and we have covered any other business on the agenda, we will move into executive session to deliberate the applicants' interviews and have a discussion about whether or whom to appoint. We will come out of executive session at that point, and we may either make a motion to appoint one of the candidates to the board, or we may do something else. So, but we will not make the decision behind closed doors. We will make the decision in public. And other than that, I don't think there's anything else. Please keep your microphones on mute unless it is your turn to speak. And I think that's everything, and we can get started. So are there any agenda additions or changes or items to be? There's no consent agenda, so there's nothing to pull from the consent agenda.
This is Greg. I do have 2 agenda changes. We do not have the contract for the AFSCME ready for discussion yet, so I request that the board remove items 5B and 7B from the agenda.
Okay. Any other changes to the agenda?
That is it from staff.
That's it.
Thank you, Greg and Evan. Well, then I will accept a motion to approve the agenda as revised.
I move that we approve the agenda as revised.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vince and Pat. Any further discussion? All those in favor of amending the agenda, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay. So now we'll move on to item 4, public to be heard. First, we will take anyone who needs to speak to the board about a topic that is not on the agenda tonight. If you wish to speak, you can either raise your hand using the hand icon in your menu, or you can use the chat feature to indicate that you wish to speak.
Mr. Bergeron is raising his hand on video that I can see.
Oh, thank you. I can't see Dennis. Go ahead, Dennis. Dennis Bergeron, if you'd like to speak, you can unmute your mic.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I want to go back to the $3,000 authorization that was made to the Essex Junction Parks and Rec. And to get a clarification, what was that actually for?
Are you referring to the board authorized paying Essex Junction Recreation and Parks $3,000 to cover the additional fee that town outside the village residents would have to pay in order to use EJRP services?
Did that include the pool also?
Greg, I'm not sure. Do you know the answer to that? I'm not sure.
I want to say that pool and daycare were exempt. Not sure if Evan can confirm that.
I'd have to double check. I don't remember it covering the pool or daycare.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help, Dennis?
Well, I guess if they can, so you're saying that the pool and the daycare was not in that package deal. Is that correct?
Not
That's
for
what they're
that,
saying.
and I'm not even sure that is the correct amount that was in the budget, so I'd have to double check.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question or speak to the board about an item that's not on the agenda? Okay. Seeing none, now we will shift. We had some residents at our last board meeting asking to speak about the select board vacancy at this meeting. So I'd like to give a few minutes for anyone who has any questions or comments about the select board vacancy. They can speak now. Let me know by either raising your hand or putting a comment in the chat. Okay. I see Ken Signorello has his hand up. Go ahead, Ken.
Okay, testing. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Yes, I was the one who requested to be able to speak at the beginning. I really appreciate you making the time to do that. Very convenient and great for us to get a chance to speak before you hear anything. So I've given this a bit of thought, and of course, I was one who preferred that this appointment not be an appointment, but go to either a special election or wait until the next convenient election. But being that we're going to do an appointment, there's a few things that I'd like to be considered that you may or may not have on the list of questions, but as you're hearing the questions answered, maybe you'll consider these items. Just 7 briefly. They come up with an acronym, CAPE DUD, unfortunately. First of all, commitment. I'd like to see an appointee who shows some commitment and interest in running in March so that we'll get a chance for some continuity. That's one of the attributes I'm hoping to see. Possibly consider for future situations like this, maybe an alignment with a procedure that the village recently used where they actually appointed a runner-up from a previous election. I think it was the same one where there was a vacancy, I'm not sure, but it seemed like a great idea, and maybe that's something to consider down the road. Perceptiveness. Hold on a second. Skittles, what are you doing? Jeez, my dog is going crazy. Perceptiveness. I'd like to see a candidate that has a pretty good knowledge of TOV and village issues so that they're aware and bring that to bear at the same time that they're being newly appointed to the board. Of course, experience. We need a board, somebody with local government experience. Clearly, somebody preferably with budgetary experience. Clearly, we're going to be seeing a lot of need for that. And a track record for showing up and making tough, difficult decisions. That's important as well. Just serving isn't really the only criteria on that. A desire to serve, preferably someone who's actually run for office, maybe select board, maybe another role, but somebody who definitely has shown some serious desire to serve, enough to go through an election process. Unconflicted. This is kind of important, that the candidate not have potential conflicts of interest where they'll have to recuse themselves from some of the very difficult and important decisions that are coming our way. And then finally, the D in DUD, the last D, diversity. You know, half our town residents are female, and it would be nice to see the select board that mirrors that population, at least to some extent. It would be great to see an opportunity to at least maintain a modicum of diversity as we've had up to this point. Again, my personal preference would be a special election, but those are the things that I hope would be considered in this process. Thank you very much for the time. Appreciate it. Good luck.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the topic of the select board vacancy? Oh. Okay, I don't see any other folks raising their hand. I don't see any chat comments to the contrary. So, and just to address one item that Ken brought up, we are doing an appointment because that is what the charter tells us to do. In the instance of a vacancy, we are required by law to do an appointment for the remainder of the term. And that appointment lasts until the next election, and the person we appoint may run for election for the remaining year of the term, but the seat will be open for election for anyone who wishes to run. And then the following year, it would be open for a full 3-year term. But we are absolutely following the instructions of the charter when we do this process. So the first candidate to speak will be Margaret Smith. So what I'd like to do is, Margaret, unmute your mic, please. And we're going to have 15 minutes to talk with you about your desire to be on the board. Board members, I'd like each of you to take a turn with one of the questions. Perhaps pick one of the ones that you wrote that you'd like to use throughout the evening. And we will listen to Margaret's statement, and then we will ask her 5 questions. Margaret, are you here and ready?
I'm here. I'm ready. I think I'm ready.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for stepping up.
Well, thank you for allowing me to step up.
Why don't you start by giving us a statement as to why you've decided to run for, or to apply for this vacancy?
Well, I've lived in Essex since 1974. I finally figured out it was like 45 years if I did my math right. And I've watched a lot of things happening, and I never considered running for office because it was kind of a daunting process, and I'm slightly shy kind of person. But I have thought this might be a chance to, as it were, get my feet wet and possibly run with advice of lots of people for the next go round.
Elaine, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Margaret. So let's go in order. Let's have Pat do the next question, then Andy, then Vince, and then I'll do a question. Okay? Go ahead, Pat.
Sounds great. Thanks for being here tonight, Margaret. So first question that we have for you, what is your understanding of what it means to be a public servant?
I think it means someone who is available to listen, and available to listen to all the voices of the community, and to try to the best of their ability to make decisions that reflect what the community wants and needs, and to be available to answer emails and phone calls, and when appropriate, refer any questions to the chair.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Andy, will you go next, please?
Okay, so I'll pose one of the questions that I had suggested here. Since there are 9 individuals who have asked to be appointed, this kind of goes to a comment that Ken made earlier. There are 9 individuals that have been appointed. There's a chance that we won't come to consensus because there's 9 individuals to choose from. So our question is, would you be, we may be required to call for an election. So if that happens, would you then run a campaign for the seat, assuming that we potentially would have the election, for the primary, the August 11th would probably be the earliest opportunity.
I would seriously consider it. Like I said, this is all a new adventure for me, and I would canvass the select board meetings, members, and anybody I could think of for advice on how to do that. So I guess my best answer is I think so.
Okay, thank you. Vince.
Alrighty. So I don't have a question on here, but can I do number 4? Does anyone
Pick
matter?
whichever one you like.
Alrighty. How do you feel the select board should proceed when discussing merger of the town of Essex and the village of Essex Junction?
I personally am in favor of merger, but I've listened to state representatives and school board members and town select board members talk about fallout from COVID and what the uncertainty of the upcoming budget is likely to be. And I think there are going to be some awfully difficult budget decisions coming down the pike. And I know that the select board has been wrestling with this issue. But I would really love to see, and also considering the difficulty in communication back and forth between residents and select board and village and town and the legislators and the residents, is just, the communication is just so difficult right now that I would love to see it just wait until we could really find out what people are looking for and make it work that way.
All right, thank you.
All right. I will ask a question. We meet a minimum of 3 or 4 nights a month for several hours at a time. There's a lot of information to read and understand for each meeting, especially during budget time in late December and January. Are you prepared for that time commitment?
Well, as you may have noticed, I show up at an awful lot of select board meetings, including the all-day budget meetings. And in the last 2 years, I have requested the budget packet from Sarah, and she kind of groans slightly, but she's good enough to give it to me. I'm not sure I understand it all, but I do my best to read through it. And in preparation for tonight, I actually read through the charter draft for post-merger with much underlining and learning new things at every page. So yeah, I think I would have to do more reading. I would have to read the packets much more carefully than just skimming it, but I've been to an awful lot of meetings, so.
Pat, why don't you go for the next question since you're vice chair?
Absolutely. Margaret, I think the last question that we have for you is, before we do the wrap up at least, what do you see as the most pressing issue facing Essex right now, and for the next few years in the future?
Well, I'm really concerned about environmental issues and affordable housing and the policing and diversity issues. I noticed that I watched the recruiting video that the police did and saw that there were no people of color in that video. And the woman that they showed, I only remember one, they showed her sitting at a computer, looking at a monitor. So I think that diversity is an issue. And I know there was money in the budget this year for I believe diversity sensitivity training. I don't know what happened with that. I think the money hasn't been spent at this point. But I think the biggest issue going forward, at least for the next couple of years, is going to be COVID fallout.
Great, thank you very much.
So Margaret, your questions, your answers have been very concise, and so we have 8 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
I'm going to say 2 things. The first is, if you'd like to make a closing statement, that would be great. If you have any questions for us, this would be the time.
Yeah, I just want to say that I've lived in Essex. Well, I said in my letter, and I raised my 2 sons here, and my son, who is back living in Vermont after stints in Minneapolis and Connecticut, and he and his wife wanted to buy a house for their family, and they looked and looked in Essex, and the one thing that they could afford had like 5 full price offers the first day, and they weren't it. So they wound up in Jericho, which at least is not Colorado, like some of my friends. So affordable housing, even for middle income people, even before COVID, was definitely an issue. I do remember one comment, I think, from the folks over at Lang Farm saying that they didn't, if I remember this right, that they didn't want affordable housing in their area because it wasn't the type of neighborhood they were trying to promote. And I hope I'm wrong about that, but I remember being slightly shocked. So, and this was probably a couple of years ago. Anyhow, so I hope I was concise enough. I will say that I don't have a huge gift of gab, and I tend to not go on and on and on for things. So hopefully that would be a plus at select board meetings.
It certainly would. Do you have any questions for us?
Not concerning the interview. I have a question on something else. Oh, and I did want to say that I was really excited about the interviews for the new Housing Commission. And the candidates that I saw all looked wonderful. So I think you will have a really good group going forward, and hopefully they can make some significant changes.
Margaret, thank you very much. And I just want to say we're only able to choose one person. So we thank you for putting your hat in the ring. And also, if it ends up not being you, I hope you'll at least consider getting involved in a committee or something, because everyone who has stepped up for this position is someone who would be a wonderful person on any of our other local committees or boards. So please think about that.
I will indeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, our next person is Bart Sherman. Come on down. We are looking for Bart Sherman. Are you present? I'm not sure I see Bart in the list of attendees. Greg, have you heard from Bart? Did he confirm?
I'm just reading an email from him now that he sent a little while ago. Let's see. He got late notice and did not feel prepared enough to participate. Apologizes for any inconvenience and sends his apologies to the select board members. Thanks everyone for their time and consideration.
So am I correct in interpreting that he is withdrawing?
That is how I read that, yes.
Okay. That's too bad. Okay, the next person on the list is someone we know very well, Alan Nye. Alan, I can barely hear you.
How about, is this better?
Not really.
Not really. So what to do? Recommendation?
Do you have headphones or earbuds that you can wear?
Try that. Is this
Alan?
better? Yeah.
Yes.
Is that better?
Yes, it is.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for bearing with us with technical difficulties. So as I said to our first candidate, we're going to take 15 minutes to talk with you. There is a time for you to do an opening statement and a closing statement, and we have 5 questions. Are you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so why don't you go ahead and tell us why you've decided to put your hat in the ring?
Okay. I've been a lifelong Chittenden County resident. I have almost lived in Essex for 50 years, moved here as soon as we got married out of college, and spent 18 years on the select board. Prior to that, I did a 7-year stint on the planning commission. During my time on the select board, I did some stuff with CCRPC, the regional planning. I was on the CCTA board for a while, Winooski Valley Park District for a while, and now, of course, am fulfilling my civic duties as the Essex Town and Essex Village rep on the Waste District. I'm a professional engineer by trade, a civil engineer. I have been on both the committee for the police department and for the town offices for the design. I spent some time in the school district working on all 3 of their new buildings at one time or another, or additions and buildings. So I think I bring a lot of knowledge to the board. I disagree with the gentleman that spoke a little bit earlier. I do not have any intention of running for the board in March. I figure that I have done my duty. I just want to help the town out here if you feel that I can. And the reason for that, my belief in that, is that when I was on the board, we were looking not to give somebody a leg up in running for office as to having, 6 or 7 months on the board and thereby being, somebody that has a leg up in the election when it comes up, when everybody's even up. So I just feel that now is, and I had no idea the number of people were going to apply. A lot of times there's very few. So, so that's about where I am, Elaine.
Thank you, Alan. We'll go through our questions now.
Sure.
Go ahead, Pat.
Alan, good to hear you, even though I don't see you. So we'll I think we're going to stick with the same questions that we had for each of the candidates. So mine, the first one is, what's your understanding of what it means to be a public servant?
I think, everybody looks at it a little bit differently. My thought was always to be available and be out there so that people can tell me what I was doing wrong or right or how they felt about issues. It's always to take the information that you get, and not all the time is it isn't such that you want to just take that information. You have to stand up for some of your own beliefs, but it's to listen to the public, and to make the best decisions you can in support of the public. I am a fiscal conservative, and sometimes that gets in the way of folks appreciating what you are doing, for them and for the town. But I just, over the years, as I said, I won elections 6 times and lost 1, but always had the town's best interest at heart, I believe.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Alan.
All right, Alan, next question is there's 9 people who are running, who have been, or not running, who have asked to be appointed. There's a chance that the select board may not come to consensus and would be required to call for an election. I know you've already said that you wouldn't want to run in March, but if we needed to fill this seat by having an election, would you consider running?
I guess I would give it, I would consider it, Andy. I guess I would, I don't know that it would be possible, but I guess I would like to know if, the board would want me to serve or not, then I guess that decision would be made. But I don't really want to run for office again. So I would give it some consideration, but I don't know that I would do it.
Okay, thanks.
All right, and well, so how do you feel the select board should proceed when discussing merger of the town of Essex and the village of Essex Junction?
Very openly, and everything on the table. I think that when I was on the board, we had a couple of soirees down this road, and a couple of things that I always argued for, and we didn't always get, was to make sure that we had all of the information out there for the public to see and hear. If we're talking about financial savings, let's be specific as to what we strongly believe are going to be those savings. If we're talking about equipment savings and not having to buy this or that, let's make sure that the public knows that, because those are the reasons and why they would vote for or against the merger. And I believe that the one go round we had on a vote was 3 issues. I think that ended up in my mind. They never were publicized by the Free Press or the reporter, but I spoke very strongly against a name, and I think that was some people voted no because of that. I felt very strongly about that if we are merging, there would be a consolidation, and we probably are going to be reducing staff. So let's be very clear and open about that. And the last item, I'm trying to remember, it was a long time ago, and I'm getting older, but there, those 3 issues I felt very strongly were going to affect the vote, and I feel they did. So open, clear, and everything on the table.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alan.
Thank you.
Alan, you're well aware of how often we meet and the budgetary process and the commitment of time. Are you in a position where you can spend that much time, and are you ready for that time commitment?
Of course, I know of the time commitment, especially during budget times, and now that you're meeting with respect to merger issues and everything. So yes, I am prepared to make those commitments with respect to time.
Okay, Pat?
Great. And last question before your closing statements, as it were. What do you see as the most pressing issue facing Essex right now and for the next few years into the future?
Well, I feel that, the biggest issue that we're dealing with right now is merger. And it is, combines a lot of other things that are there. It makes the community much larger and provides, some opportunities for a lot of things. Affordable housing, the diverse workforce, as Ms. Smith mentioned. But there are all those items that you can bring up, but I think that you guys have on your plate this merger issue, and that is the most important thing that you're working on at the present point in time. Consolidate or reduction in expenses is one item that I always worked hard on when I was on the board.
So Alan, you have about 6 minutes left, and you're an opportunity to make a closing statement and to ask the board any questions you may have.
No, I really don't have, a whole lot more in a closing statement. I'm willing to, serve to help the town out. I think I come to the table with a lot of knowledge, experience, and I've spent the budget process a number of times over. So it's whether you're looking for somebody that has been down the road before, and then of course the last item is that if you're looking for somebody that gets experience from this experience so that they can run in March, I am not the guy that you want to select.
Okay. Well, Alan, thank you very much for taking the time and for being willing to serve yet again. I would ask you if you were interested in serving on other committees in case you don't get this appointment, but I already know the answer to that.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you very much, and we'll let you know what happens.
Okay, I'm going to sign off.
Okay, thank you, Alan.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Our next candidate is Dawn Hill-Fleury. Is Dawn present?
I'm right here, Elaine.
Hello, Dawn.
Hi, how are you?
Great. How are you doing tonight?
Wonderful, thank you. Sun shining.
It was a gorgeous day. So I will do the same thing. It's all going to be memorized by the end of the evening. Please let us know in an opening statement why you've decided to step up for this appointment, and then we'll go through some questions.
Certainly. I have always wanted to serve on the select board. I've served on multiple committees in the town, including the Board of Civil Authority and the school board and other volunteer positions, but never gotten as far as the select board, and I think now's the time to step up.
And Pat, go ahead.
Great. Don, thanks for being with us tonight. My question, what is your understanding of what it means to be a public servant?
A public servant is someone who serves the community, provides representation for all members of the community, is someone that gives back to the community they live in. I've always believed in giving back to the town of Essex. Growing up here, I've been here for over 60 years, and we won't go any further than that. But even before we had a police department, I went door to door circulating a petition to get a police department. When it was time to get a high school, I went door to door to get signatures for a high school, and this was all before I could vote. So I've always believed in giving back to this community. It's been good to me and my family, and it's an honor to serve.
Great, thank you, Don.
All right, I should probably disclose that Don and I worked together with the Boy Scouts several years ago. So
Well,
good to hear.
Bison just goes, Andy, I've worked with all of you at one point, except for Vince, so.
Yeah. All right, so Don, since there's 9 individuals who have asked to be appointed, there's a chance that the seated select board may not come to consensus, and we would be then required to call for an election. If that happens, are you willing to run a campaign for this seat?
I am very willing to do so, and also come spring if I was appointed to fill the temporary position. I like campaigning.
Wow.
I like meeting people. You meet so many exciting and interesting people. I think it's great.
I'm right there with you, Don.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you, Don.
Vince, your turn.
Alrighty. So how do you feel the select board should proceed with discussing merger of the town of Essex and the village of Essex Junction?
Much to what I agree with what Alan said. It needs to be open discussion. It needs to be honest. All the information has to be out there. It has to be factual. It has to be honest. And everyone needs to be included in the decision-making process. It can't be at town meeting day, we vote on a budget that's merged something here, or merged an office there, or consolidated something else within the town and village. It needs to be an open and honest process where everyone has a say before a vote.
All right, Dawn. So you're probably very familiar with our time commitment and
I am.
the extent of the work that we do during budget season. And are you prepared to make the necessary time commitment to be on the select board?
I am very available to make that commitment. I'm retired. I'm only working part-time at the census, and that winds up pretty soon, and that's during the day anyway. But I'm free all evenings and ready to give the time that this will take. I enjoy board work, and I actually enjoy budget work too. So,
Pat?
Okay. Don, last question before your closing statement. What do you see as the most pressing issue facing Essex right now and also going forward for the next few years?
open and honest merger discussions, financial stability, and affordability of living in Essex, both town and village. We need to encourage more people to be here. Our young people are still leaving because they can't afford to live in Essex, and I would like to be able to see them stay here. I think it's a wonderful town to live in, and it's just, I hate to see it change, Pat.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Don.
Okay, so we have a lot of time left for time slots. Would you like to make a closing statement? And do you have any questions for the board?
I don't have any questions. I want to thank you all for your time. I know it's a huge commitment to serve on the board. I appreciate you taking the time to do these interviews this way. And as I said earlier, it would be an honor to serve on the select board. I look forward to working with each and every one of you and to be working with the people in the town of Essex, hearing their thoughts and their concerns. And I just appreciate everything we have in this town. So I thank you very much, all of you. And I think the other reason is that every board needs a curmudgeon. And as old as I am, I think it's time for a curmudgeon. So that's what when I ran for the school board, I told them that too. But,
That's good to know. Writing it down.
So, but no, I appreciate just
How do you spell
everything.
that?
Curmudgeon?
How do you spell it?
But it's good to have people that have been here a while. I mean, lived through every single merger vote there is. and have seen all sides of it and all the results and all the comments, and I think it would be a good resource too, having lived through so much. But thank you.
Dawn, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate your time and your willingness to step up yet again.
Well, thank you.
All
So
right.
we'll sign off and then you'll let us know later. Is that what you're going to do?
Yes, you're welcome to stick around, but yes, that's what we're going to do.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I will do that.
Okay, well, moving right along, this is going far quicker than I expected. Our next candidate is Jane Donahue Davis.
Hello.
Hi, Jane. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well, thanks. So I'm not sure when you joined the meeting, but what we're going to be doing is asking you to do an opening statement, and then we have 5 questions for you, and then an opportunity for a closing statement and questions to the board.
Okay.
So why don't you tell us why you've decided to step up?
Okay. I decided to step up because I saw the need. I think that's pretty typical of me. I certainly was apprehensive, having only lived here since 2017, but I was born and raised in Vermont, and I've lived in Chittenden County most of my adult life. And I would say I am one of those people, when I see a need, I kind of jump in. I served on the school board. When I lived in Richmond, I went to vote at 7 a.m. on town meeting day, saw nobody was running, went home, printed off all these little cards, and then stood outside the polling place the rest of the day, handing out cards with my name on, because I didn't want that position to go unfilled. So I think, that kind of is the reason. When I see a need, I'm one of those people that's ready to jump in.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Pat.
God, unmute. There needs to be an easier way for me to remember that. Jane, thanks for being here tonight. So my question, what is your understanding of what it means to be a public servant?
Being a public servant means that you represent your constituents, the voters. I've sat on lots of governing boards. Select board would be new for me, but you represent the people that put you into that position. If you're voted in, and so you need to be true to that, and you need to be able to listen, you need to be able to communicate, and you need to be able to express those feelings from the people you represent while serving in that position.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Jane, there are 9 individuals running, or not running, I keep saying running, who have been asked to be appointed to this seat. There's a chance that we won't come to consensus after these interviews, and we may be required to call for an election. So the question is whether, if that happens, whether you'd be willing to run a campaign for this seat.
I would be willing to do that. I think, as I just expressed with my story, I've done that in the past when I saw that need. So yes, I would be willing to do that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So how do you feel the select board should proceed when discussing merger of the town of Essex and the village of Essex Junction?
So in reading through meeting notes, listening to people, I think, and I was in the last meeting when they were talking about the merger, I think you proceed by listening to the voters. And one of the things that was mentioned in the last meeting is that there's a thought that maybe the vote in November should be put off because we have townspeople whose taxes will be raised and we're in a tough time. There's people unemployed and underemployed, and it does mean a tax increase for people who live in the town. I live in the town. I don't want my taxes to go up, but that's kind of presuming that the people in the village don't have underemployment or unemployment. So, and they're already tax burdened. So I think it's really important to look from an equity standpoint of where we're at and listen to all voters. Yes, some people's taxes would go up. It would be important that that's done incrementally so that the financial impact is able to be controlled. But I think the number one thing is listening to the voters, and putting a vote off is kind of taking that away from our voters.
So Jane, the select board meets a lot. We meet 3 or 4 nights a month, several hours at a time. There's a lot of reading. There's a lot of time commitment, particularly around budget season. Are you prepared for that level of time commitment? Because it's a lot.
I think it's probably pretty similar to what I found when I was serving on the school board. And if I wasn't prepared, I wouldn't be here now.
Okay. Thank you.
Well,
All right, and Jane, I'll follow up with the last question before your closing statement. What do you see as the most pressing issue facing Essex right now and for the next few years into the future?
certainly the merger is a pressing issue. I think in addition to that, the impact that COVID-19 has had on small businesses. I just started my own small business, so I'm seeing the effects of that as well. So I think that that's something that Essex will have to address. But I also see affordable housing as an issue. I have 2 children who would have loved to live in Essex. They did rent for a while, and they both have moved out because they just couldn't afford to buy a home in Essex, which is heartbreaking when you're a mom. So I think that's an issue that, we want to keep young people here, and I think that's one way to do it. So we should be looking at that.
Great, thank you.
So Jane, you have an opportunity to give us a closing statement if you have one. And if you have any questions for us, please feel free to ask.
I don't have any questions. I do want to thank you. I think this is a great opportunity for you to gain another strong member, and I know the decision's not going to be easy with so many candidates. So thank you for your time on that. And I look forward to hearing what happens in the end, and I will stay connected no matter what.
Yes, please do. And if you are not the chosen candidate, then please consider serving on a board in the community. Okay, well, thank you very much. And we will let you know as soon as we're done deliberating. And so you're welcome to stick around for the rest of the meeting or to sign off, and we'll get back in touch.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Tracey Delphia is our next applicant.
Good evening. How are you?
Hello, very well. How are you? Nice to meet you.
Good. Nice to meet you.
Tracey, I'm going to say the same thing I've said to all the candidates. You have an opportunity to give us an opening statement, and then we'll do 5 questions, closing statement, and if you have questions for us. So please let us know what prompted you to decide to apply for this position.
All my life, I've felt the value of being involved. I feel firmly that if you're not involved and not offering your opinion and not participating, you can't really complain about the outcome. So I have practically since college, done my best to be involved and lend my intelligence, common sense where I can for the betterment of the communities in which I live. I'll try not to basically read my letter of interest But for the past 15 years, I have sat on the board of trustees for the Vermont State Employees Association, experience managing a multi-million-dollar budget funded by members. I have extensive experience with contract negotiations and the collective bargaining process. I did serve as the vice chair of South Burlington's Planning Commission throughout a period of interim zoning, a major revamp of the city charter, numerous updates to the land development regulations, including the creation and implementation of form-based code, as well as an application for a TIF district to the legislature that was ultimately granted. Yeah, and I'm here because I would have run in March. I'm sort of getting ahead of myself and into your questions. I would have run in March, but I was selected 2 years ago to be part of the 2020 cohort for the Vermont Certified Public Manager Program. So I just didn't have the time up until now. Graduation is on June 26th. So my schedule has freed up.
Great, that's awesome. Why don't we get started with questions, Pat?
Yeah. Tracy, thanks for being here tonight. Can you talk to us, what is your understanding about what it means to be a public servant?
Being a public servant, I am a state employee, so I am by profession a public servant. A major part of a public servant is compartmentalization, taking your personal thoughts, feelings, and putting them on the shelf while you're dealing with gathering the facts, getting input from residents, from your neighbors, from members of the community, and various stakeholders in order to make a data-driven decision that's best for the community and ultimately what the community wants.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Tracy, there's 9 folks that have asked to be appointed to this seat. And there's a chance that the select board won't come to consensus tonight. And then we'd be required to call for an election. So the question is whether you'd be willing to or would want to run a campaign for this seat if we were to say have an election in August or so.
In a word, yes. I've been a candidate in campaigns before. I've run campaigns before. Most recently, a successful campaign for the current mayor of Barrie. So I'm very familiar with campaign laws, finance laws, and I'm more than willing to do that work.
Okay, thank you.
And that was my plan anyway, was to run in March now that my VCPM program is over.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. So how do you feel the select board should proceed when discussing merger of the town of Essex and the village of Essex Junction?
I think there's a lot of education to be done. I don't feel as though residents in every area have completely come to a decision on the what's in it for me question for themselves. I believe that the process should be, as someone else stated, putting out educational materials with no preconceived notions, no desire for an outcome, but putting that information out there, all of the data, all of the pros, all of the cons, and allowing residents to ask questions and really ask those hard-hitting questions about what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my household and my budget and my neighbors? And just having an open and honest, collaborative conversation regarding those questions.
Tracy, the select board meets 3 to 4 nights a month. We have very long meetings and there's a lot of homework and reading, particularly around the budget season. What is your do you expect to be able to meet the commitment of time for being on the select board?
I'm kind of a big nerd in that area, so there is no problem. I've been in city council meetings in South Burlington until 1 a.m. I've been in bargaining sessions until midnight. It comes with the territory, it's part of the role, and I'm eager to stay up until midnight and put in that work.
Well, we have a rule that we don't go past 11 unless we have a unanimous vote.
Thank you. It's the same way in the ZBA as well, and I was very happy to see that in their operating guidelines.
Pat?
Last question for you, Tracy. What do you see as the most pressing issue facing Essex right now and for the next few years into the future?
I think the obvious answer is budget and affordability in the aftermath of COVID-19. Now more than ever, it's important to live within our collective means. You know, as a state employee, as I said, we're constantly being asked to do more with less. I'm very versed and very capable of doing that. But the other issue I would pinpoint is a general divisiveness. And people need to feel that they're not only being heard, but they're also being listened to. People respect having facts presented to them in order to make their own decisions. And I think there's much value in just sitting and truly listening to understand, not just to hear and preparing to speak.
So Tracy, do you have any closing statement that you'd like to make or any questions for the board?
I don't have any questions. I did have, I know, sorry, I'm getting a lot of glare here. I did have just a few comments, if I may.
Of course.
I feel strongly in the value of saying, I don't know, and following up with the answer. There's much value in admitting that we don't have all of the answers, but that we'll work together to find them. And it also builds trust from the community for its leaders. I feel very strongly in data-driven decisions. No decision should be made without the data and analysis to back it up. And lastly, any governing body should be focused on fiscal responsibility. We're entrusted to make decisions with other people's tax dollars, and that requires that residents have complete trust in their elected officials. And as such, those elected officials need to earn that trust through transparency. Also, a candidate's views on an individual issue matters far less than their integrity and overall approach to those issues. I can't tell you how I would vote in any given situation, but what I can do is promise that I will always vote on the side of common sense after hearing all information pertinent to that decision. While the background information of how we got into a place is important, that knowledge too often comes with an emotional reaction to one or more viewpoints. I have the experience needed to start on day one with no preconceived notions or dispositions. I'm a blank slate whose only focus is to represent the whole of Essex. And I would also like to thank everyone for their time.
Thank you, Tracy. We appreciate that very much. And we will let you know, and feel free to stick around, or if you'd like to sign off, you're welcome to do that as well.
Sounds good. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks, you too. Thanks for stepping up. Okay, our next candidate is Kendall Chamberlin.
Hello, am I on?
You are on. I don't see you, but I hear you.
I just phoned in.
Oh, okay, you're on the phone. Great. So Kendall, you have a 15-minute time slot, and please start with an introduction about yourself and why you've decided to run, and then we have some questions for you.
Okay, well, I've been born and raised in Essex. I've lived out in the end of the road that was a dead-end road all my life. I've watched the select board a number of years, thought about running, but really hard to run. As Margaret said, it's very intimidating. Seems like you got to know a lot of people just to get 30 signatures. But time seemed right. I was talking to a neighbor about being on the select board, and they thought that they would vote for me, so it seemed like the right time to throw my hat in. And they did add that it would certainly give the board a new perspective. So that's it.
That's great. Pat, go ahead.
Kendall, thanks for being here with us today. My question is, what is your understanding of what it means to be a public servant?
A public servant, quite simply, serves the public. I've worked for the town of Richmond since I was about 20 years old. I worked my way up from the starting position to managing the department, which I've done for over 30 years. I know that when you serve the public, you have to serve all the members of the public, even if you may not agree personally with what that means, and you follow the policy and you set rules and regulations that represent all of your constituents. So being a public servant is trying to live up to that ideal in all situations, even in those where you may have a personal stake in it.
Great, thank you.
All right, Kendall, there's 9 folks that have asked to be appointed to this seat, and there's a chance that the select board won't come to consensus tonight, given all the discussion we're having tonight. And we may be required to call for an election in that case. So if that happens, would you be willing to run a campaign for this seat?
I can tell you that my wife would love to do that on my behalf. I'm not sure that that would be a good thing, but I can guarantee you that if it came to that, she would look at that as a challenge. And she would be all in, as would I.
All right. Well, Kendall, how do you feel the select board should proceed with discussing merger of the town of Essex and the village of Essex Junction?
Well, I think really that the town is not ready for a merger. That's kind of my position, and I look at that from the sense where you have some very vocal, very well-read and factual people on both sides that are for and against it. So much so it's like a 50-50 when you look at it quick. I also think that in order for a merger to work, having been involved in the town of Richmond and the village of Richmond merger, is that it's very important that it's 2 equals that come to the table and that both are represented. And since the town of Essex and the village of Essex Junction have strong personal identities as communities, and they are pretty much equal in population at the point, it needs to be a discussion between 2 equals. I think that as long as you're looking at a tax shift from one to the other, that you've got a pretty steep hill to get up. I think that if you were looking at the 2 of them and continuing your consolidation of departments that didn't result in a lot of transfers of funds one way or the other, that you would probably be on a pretty smooth road to merger.
Kendall, the select board meets 3 or 4 times a month for several hours at a time. There's a lot of reading and there's a lot of homework. Do you have the time to make the commitment to being on the select board?
Yes, I had a long discussion with my wife about it, and she's like, what's the hurry? Get out of the house. You can spend as much time out of the house as you want. So I think she has some plans should I get on the board.
Pat, go ahead.
Yeah, you have to have the backing of your family. So obviously she's kind of pushing me out the door.
All right, Ken, the last question before your closing statement. What do you see as the most pressing issue facing Essex right now and for the next few years into the future?
Well, having been here as long as I have and had the merger question, merge, not merge, approve, vote, return over the vote, vote again, turn down, I think that until the town of Essex and the village of Essex Junction come to an agreement of some kind, that's going to be the hot ticket item. I also think that the finances are looming pretty good. I am a little bit concerned when you have 2 communities like the town of Essex and the village of Essex Junction, even though you're one community, and one of them has a significant amount of extra cost to the point where you need to shift some of that over to the others. You really got to start looking at your finances close. I also think that whatever happens with the state response to COVID and everything that's going on, that's apt to affect the coffers of the town as well. I do think that Essex is in a very good position, though, with all the fund balance that you have. That was good thinking of all the past select boards.
Great, thank you.
So Kendall, do you have a closing statement you'd like to make about why you chose to run? And do you have any questions for the board?
Well, the main reason I chose to run was, as I put in my letter, I wanted to make sure that the board had a well-rounded, diverse selection of residents of the town. And I think you have. You get some really good candidates from what I'm hearing. I do tend to be a rabble-rouser. I can be a thorn, a devil's advocate. I tend to ask a lot of questions, and, you know, sometimes that can create friction, but I just think it was time to put my hat in the ring.
Okay, well, thank you very much for stepping up. And you're welcome to continue listening into the meeting, or you can hang up and we will let you know what the outcome is. It's up to you.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Kendall. Okay, our next candidate, our penultimate candidate, is Dennis Bergeron.
Hello.
Hello, Dennis. So would you like to make a statement about why you've chosen to be a candidate, and then we'll ask some questions?
Okay. I decided to run to become a candidate because you know, seeing what's been going on over the past few years. I've lived in the town outside the village for 24 years. I've came from Connecticut. I've been a public servant for the government for 34 years. I've handled labor relations, facility budgets, and stuff like that. And I decided that it's time to start giving back some of my knowledge to the residents that live in the town outside the village, and also the village residents, to enable to see both sides of the story and work with consensus as a team player.
Thank you. Pat, go ahead.
Okay. Dennis, can you talk about what do you see as your understanding of what it means to be a public servant?
Well, as a public servant, you tend to leave most of your life behind. You work with the public, the taxpayers. Like I said, 34 years as a public servant for customer service in the government. I spent 24/7 dealing with issues, listening to people, coming up with solutions. It's been born in my blood, and basically you learn to listen, work on solutions, and draw a consensus.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Dennis, there's 9 folks that have asked to be considered for this appointment. There's a chance that we won't come to consensus tonight, and then we'll have to call for an election. If that were to happen, would you be willing to run a campaign for this seat?
And if that happens, is that everybody has to get the 30 signatures to be placed on the ballot?
I don't know. I know at least for the state level seats, that's been waived. I assume if we're still in a state of emergency, that would continue to be waived for this, but we'd have to check that.
All right, but yeah, I would check that into that, but I will campaign for the seat.
Okay, thank you.
You say you would?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
All right, Dennis. How do you feel the select board should proceed when discussing the merger of the town of Essex and the village of Essex Junction?
Dealing with how they should proceed is that there needs to be open dialogue. All cards have to be put on the table. There shouldn't be any backroom negotiations, making deals, and trying to cram stuff down people's throats. There needs to be clear, concise problems that are seen You know what I mean? Because with a merger, you're talking about shifting taxes from one portion to another. And unfortunately, based on what I've heard from residents and taxpayers in the town outside the village, you know what I mean, they're concerned, especially with the COVID-19, you know what I mean, about their taxes being raised because they're not sure they'll be able to pay their taxes come September. So we definitely would need clear, concise dialogue and come to a consensus.
Thank you, Dennis.
You're welcome.
Dennis, as you know, the select board meets 3 or 4 times a month. We have long meetings. There's a lot of homework. There's a lot of reading, especially during budget season. Do you have the time to make the commitment to be on the select board?
Well, Lane, I'm retired. I have plenty of hours in a day. Sometimes I get bored. I spend a lot of time on social media. I read the news. I follow the town meetings. You know what I mean? To do a lot of reading and homework and stuff like that and come to meetings and stuff, I don't see that as a problem.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. And Dennis, a final question. What do you see as the most pressing issue facing Essex right now and for the next few years into the future?
What I see right now is the COVID-19 issues, the backlash that's going to happen. If you notice that the governor extended the state of emergency to July 15th, you know, I'm on a fixed income. I get my Social Security benefits every month so far, unless the government shuts down. People aren't going to be able to pay taxes. You know, we need to look at our financial situations, you know, to ensure that we have the funds available and how we spend those funds. And then with the merger, you know what I mean? The merger is a big issue. Housing. I came into Vermont back in 1994. I tried to recruit people up into Vermont. Unfortunately, they had to leave because they couldn't find housing, because they couldn't find affordable housing. You know what I mean? And, you know, me working in the government up in Vermont to try to get an employee to come up, to relocate to Vermont, they couldn't find housing. You know, we definitely need housing, affordable. And that's, you know, one family homes. That's not apartments. That's not high rise apartments and stuff like that, where you put a grocery store or a pizza parlor underneath it and stuff like that as the base. We need single family homes at an affordable price to draw in people.
All right. Well, Dennis, do you have a closing statement you'd like to make about why you've decided to apply? And do you have any questions for the board?
Well, I decided to apply, you know, based on hearing everything that's going on. You know, like I said, I got 33 years experience in customer service. Actually, I worked for postal service. I was a manager in a processing facility where I was responsible for a $1 million facility budget. I was given blueprints to draw up a plan for caring for that building and stuff like that based on staffing and everything else. I coached softball, girls softball, fast pitch in Connecticut. I know what it is to be a team player. I also coached JV at Rice when I first came to Vermont. And unfortunately, they changed that because they wanted teachers to coach versus outside personnel. I believe that if chosen, I'm a team player. And, you know what I mean, there's times where people need to sit down and say, we have to agree to disagree, and let's work on a solution. That's all I have.
Dennis, thank you very much for taking the time and for putting your hat in the ring. We really appreciate it, and feel free to stick around
Okay.
or to sign off. We will let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our final candidate for the evening, and with many thanks for the patience of waiting, we have Rupesh Asher.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
We can. Nice to
Oh,
meet you.
nice meeting you. Yes, this is great. I'm the last one with alphabet of A, so here I am. I got all the questions Googled up, so I guess I'm technologically advanced and looking up the answers for the questions. So it's good. I feel that I got advantage over everyone to
Because you heard everybody.
answer. I heard everyone, and I guess with the cell phone on your hand, you can easily Google up the questions. But no, I didn't do that. I'm just gonna be personal and see why I'm gonna be selected or not. But I can be pretty honest with what I'm doing.
Well, why don't you start with telling us why you decided to apply, and then we'll go into the questions.
Perfect. Well, it's definitely a tough question of why do you want to do what you want to do? Why that question why itself is an important question. I read books, and there is a book called Why by Simon Sinek. I don't know if any one of us have read it, uh, but it gives you the perspective of why do you want to do, or why did you apply for the job, or why are you doing what job you are doing. First of all, it should provide you that happiness, the internal happiness that we all seek for. It could be a lecture, but here I'll tell you in short. um, in any organization I serve, or in anything I do, from a student at pharmacy college, I'm a pharmacist, and I always was involved with the organization, with student organizations, athletics, it could be team. I was involved in that. Then I moved on to the community, and worked in retail pharmacy. Uh, there, I said, if I'm doing what I'm doing in retail, how can I help my fellow colleagues as a pharmacist? And I got involved in Vermont Pharmacists Association. Started as a member. I didn't know when I first graduated what an organization does, and I became the chairman of the organization after 13 or 14 years into the organization. So I learned and I went up. So to answer this question, I live in a community now, and I thought this is the time to give back to the town that I have lived in for the last 20 plus years. Raised my family, 3 kids here, and look at the different perspective of how I see the town. It's like before, when I was going biking and all that, I was always thinking one thing. But when I started serving in the community, we were thinking about how these trees are growing and whether we should cut these trees or not. So it made me think that if I get involved in the town, it will answer my question of why. Number one, serve back, give back to the community, serve, and I'll be honest with you, I'll be learning. Personal thing, I'll be learning a lot of things that I don't will probably not even thought about it, but at the same time, listening to people, I'll be, enriching myself. So that will uh, definitely answer my question why I want to do it.
That's excellent. Thank you. Why don't we get started with questions?
Perfect.
Go ahead, Pat.
Great. Thanks for joining us tonight. First question, what is your understanding of what it means to be a public servant?
What is my understanding? Oh, okay. Public servant, why, um, as a public servant, you got to understand that people are depending on you as a person, okay, to enrich the society, to listen to them, and for the welfare of that particular society. At the same time, to be a servant, we have to know that we are accountable. You know, the responsibility, the accountability should be there as a person, as a member. And at the same time, there's one thing that when I applied for this job, uh, as a public servant, we should always also know what my limitations are as a servant. You know, it's very important to understand that. And by the way, I'll be honest with you, this final thing was just talking to a member in our society, and they said you should definitely be responsible, accountable. At the same time, you should know your limitations, which it again, learning. I learned that, yes, I should know that what limitations I have as a servant as well. So that's what my understanding is.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Rupesh, you've listened to the other 8 candidates. There's a possibility that we won't come to consensus tonight, and we won't be able to pick from the 9 of you. In which case we'd have to call for an election. So if we needed to go to an election, would you be willing to run a campaign for that seat?
To be honest with you, I don't know how to run for a campaign, but if given a chance, and definitely I have a desire to serve my community, and if selected, I'm definitely gonna